Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei rejected Rias in her group? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Kage no Kenshi for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. A young man stood at the gates of Kuo Academy. He looked at the school and thought, so this is where I will spend the next few years of my life. As he walked inside the school grounds, he received some glances and stares from the students around him. He heard their whispers and rumors as they traveled through the school. Is he a new student? Asked some students. He's kinda handsome, said a few girls, blushing lightly. Ain't another pretty boy, said some male students, who glared at the new student. And here we go again, said the young man in his thoughts. Nothing you can do about it, partner. You having a pretty face is one thing, but being a dragon as well doesn't help your situation, said a voice inside the young man's head. I sent some devils. No hostility though. 2 of them seem to be high class, the rest are probably their servants. I'll have to hide my presence, but they'll think I have a sacred gear and come after me. The young man internally sighed. So much for keeping a low profile. The internal voice just laughed. On the roof of the old school building sat a red-haired woman with a buxom figure playing chess. Her opponent, another woman with long black hair and a ponytail and an even greater figure, was deciding on her next move. Akeno. Tell Kaneko to watch over our new student here, said the red-haired woman to the now named Akeno. Akeno moved her queen to the square in front of her king. Hi Butchu. The tall young man was about to introduce himself when he looked around the class, finding a blonde-haired girl with green eyes. By the aura she was giving off, she was probably a devil. He looked at her for a few more seconds and then spoke up to the class. I'm Issei Haidu, he said simply. The class expected him to say more, but to no avail. Issei was a tall young man for his age, being a little over 180 centimeters tall. He had very black hair that looked like it would swallow light down to his neck. It covered his eyes to some extent, through his bangs you could see his eyes. They were black and looking into them was like looking into nothing. He had a very cold demeanor and looked unapproachable. Ambishounen, said a guy with square glasses, glaring at Issei. Next to him, a bold guy shook his head and glared at him as well. Shut up, you perverts, said a couple of girls, defending the new student as he walked over to his seat, sitting down looking bored. As the bell rang, Issei was assaulted by the girls in his class. Do you have a girlfriend, Issei-kun? No, Issei-san, where do you live? Issei-san, could you give us your email address? The girls' eyes flashed as Issei pulled out his phone, but then their hopes were shot down as he plugged in his headphones and walked out of the classroom, muttering annoying. The figure stood behind a corner, watching the young man go up to the roof of the school. Do you think it wants anything? Issei internally asked. No idea, partner. Why don't you call the devil out and see what it wants? Replied Dreg. I have nothing better to do, so why not? Boy, you behind the corner, Issei said, looking up at the sky. The figure's eyes widened at the young man. She made sure to hide her presence, so how did he know she was there? What do you want? Continued the young man. The figure stepped out, saying come with me. She was a small girl with short silver hair with cat hair clips on the right side of her head, attached to her bangs. Issei followed the girl. Arriving at an old Victorian-style building, Issei sensed a pretty strong presence inside. Probably the master. As he entered the building, he was now in a room with a red-haired beauty, another just as beautiful girl with a ponytail, a handsome guy with blonde hair, the blonde girl he saw in his class, and of course the girl that brought him in. The girl with the ponytail offered him a cup of tea. He accepted it with a thanks. She smiled in return. My name is Rias Gremory, and these are my club mates, the red-haired woman said, beginning to present her servants. Ah. So you're the rumored Crimson Ruin Princess. Issei interrupted her speech and took a sip of his tea. What? How did you? I hear things that tend to float around. This tea is quite good. Issei nodded to Akeno, who smiled back. Rias is a little unnerved. Are you aware of the supernatural world and its conflicts? Issei nodded. I see. Then I would like to introduce you to my servants. This is Himejima Akeno, she said, pointing at the girl with the ponytail, which smiled in return. This is Kibayudo, she said, to which the blonde guy waved a hand towards Issei in a friendly manner. The girl over there is Asia Argento. The blonde girl with green eyes bowed. And the one who brought you here is Taoju Kaneko. Rias finished. Now Issei-san, I assume you know why you are here. I could think of a few reasons, Issei said in a slightly mocking voice. The devils seemed unfazed by his rudeness. Whether they didn't notice it or ignored it, he didn't know. They seemed to be waiting for him to continue. However, I'm assuming you think I have a sacred gear and are trying to add me as a member of your peerage. Everyone stared at him, slightly shocked that he could guess their intention so easily. I see. Would you consider our offer? Asking Rias, beginning to walk towards Issei. What offer? Questioned Issei, feigning innocence. To join my peerage of course, said Rias, to which Issei just glared at her for a few seconds before saying no. Issei turned to the door and began to walk away. Why Rias was cut off as he closed the door. Maybe I was too straightforward. I didn't even get his name, but I just couldn't control myself around him. I want him. What a pain. Issei thought to himself as he began to walk away. He then heard something and turned to the source of the sound. Motohama. Let me see. Said the glasses-wearing guy from Issei's class. You already saw it earlier, Mitsuda. Said the bald guy from Issei's class. Issei just stood there, watching them peep on the girls' kendo club. After a few moments, he decided to leave when a group of girls came out of the building, wielding their shinai. He watched the girls chase after the running perverts, and upon cornering them, beating them up. After a few minutes of the one-sided fight, the girls headed back to their clubroom. Issei walked towards the school building, pausing to take note of the perverts' injuries. He looked back to the retreating girls and returned his gaze to the injuries. Nice. He continued to the school building, cracking a tiny smile, but not enough to be noticeable. Issei was now on the bridge walking towards his house. He lived alone, as he did for most of his life. He heard a voice behind him and turned around. "Ayano, are you Issei Haidu?" said a girl with dark purple hair and matching eyes. She was dressed in a school uniform that Issei didn't recognize. "Hi," was Issei's response. "What could a fallen angel want with me?" Issei thought as he studied the aura she was giving off. Does she think I'm just some random human? She isn't even hiding her presence. Perhaps the dragon part of you attracted her? Drake suggested. What do you want, Detenshi-san? Asked Issei, which made the girl widen her eyes. How did? You weren't even trying to hide your presence. Issei cut her off. Wait, the fallen angel called out to him as he walked away. How dare he? Issei was now in a park, thinking the fallen angel might follow him, wanting to find out where he lives. She was probably after the small power that I still can't hide. I wonder if she's still following me. Perhaps she's hiding her presence. Issei thought out loud. Just then, a spear made of light pierced his stomach. Speak of the devil, Issei said, looking at the shocked fallen. But why aren't you dead? Asked the fallen angel, as she watched Issei take out the spear, his wound healing back in seconds. I really didn't want to do anything too drastic, but Issei said, getting up and cracking his neck. You, what are you? The fallen said to Issei, shocked and curious at the same time. No one is special. Issei shrugged. Then I will kill you, whatever you are. Raynare, the fallen angel, said to Issei, preparing another spear and throwing it at Issei. He tilted his head to the left, and the spear flew past. Now, that's not nice, Raynare-san, Issei said mockingly, looking at the fallen angel. You. How dare you defy me? Raynare shouted, throwing spears, which Issei either caught and destroyed or just simply avoided with very little effort. I, Raynare, a high-level fallen angel, getting defied by the likes of you. She kept screaming, which made Issei wince. You're killing my ears, he said, starting to walk away. You aren't even worth my time. Don't you even dare walk away, you lowly being. Raynare shouted at him. You're the one who's lowly and annoying. Issei said, glaring at the fallen angel, slightly annoyed she was still yelling. Me? Lowly? Someone like you should bow to me. I am a fallen angel and you are a simple human, nothing more. Issei had enough. You know what? I was going to let you go, but you had to go and piss me off. Issei said, angry and annoyed at the fallen, his voice low but filled with power as he released some of his aura, making Raynare fall down to her knees, shivering and trembling. Raynare tried to say something, to retort. She was a proud fallen angel, but his voice and power made her stutter. His power is so monstrous. Issei, now, calm, began. I should kill you, you know him. No, I have a better idea. Issei began to walk towards the fallen angel, biting his index finger to draw blood. What are you going to do? Asked Raynare. Drink the blood. Issei demanded. Drink. Raynare was confused at the young man. I said. Drink. Issei commanded with the same power-filled voice, which made a shiver run down Raynare's back as she obeyed. What is happening? Raynare's body began to glow a faint crimson as she felt something inside of her, like a new power. On her chest, a symbol of a curled-up black dragon surrounded by red fire appeared. I made you my servant. Issei said simply. Servant? Asked Raynare, shocked and confused as how could this man make her his servant by drinking his blood. At the end of class, Issei noticed that he received more stares than usual. When he looked at some of the girls, they blushed deeply and suddenly looked at the ground with more interest. He heard them whispering. Did you hear? Issei-sama has joined the Occult Research Club. Did he really? Issei-sama is so cool. Damn this school and these stupid girls. Issei heard Drake chuckling lightly. As Issei sat back in his seat, his head looking at the ceiling, girls started to gather around him, still whispering rumors about him. They continued to ask Issei for his contact info and tried to squeeze out any other thing about him, but he just ignored them. All of a sudden, the girls looked at the door to find Kiba entering the room. Kiba-kun. They all screamed in delight, which made Issei wince from the noise and cover his ears. Is Haidu Issei-kun here? Kiba asked the girls politely, looking for the black-haired teen. The girls moved out of the way and pointed to Issei, saying, Issei-sama is here. Kiba looked confused, then spoke Sama. Issei glared at Kiba. What do you want from Golden Locks? Asked Issei in a mocking tone that wasn't caught by anyone, not even Kiba, who suddenly started to blush. The girls noticed this and already started gossiping about their apparent gay relationship. What the hell is wrong with these people? Issei said to himself as he followed Kiba. The girls were already discussing which of the two was the dominant one. Some were even claiming that Issei would be very submissive in bed, despite his harsh personality. Fuck this. I should just kill them all. Issei cursed the girls in his mind. Break, by now, was laughing hysterically in his head. He taunted Issei. Please be gentle Kiba-san. I'm not used to this. Ha ha ha. If I ever find a way to make you a body, I'm going to chain you to a wall and test all kinds of torture on you for eternity. As Issei once again found himself in the occult research club room, Rias started to apologize for her earlier behavior. Apology accepted, said Issei, taking a sip from the tea he received from Akeno. He turned to Akeno. This tea is quite good. Akeno just smiled in response. He turned back to Rias. You want something else like Rias-senpai? It was not a question, but a statement. Well, Rias began explaining. I want to show you how my peerage fights in case you change your mind and decide to join my peerage. I would like to see you fight as well for safety precautions. I see. So you want to see what I can do with my sacred gear? Asked Issei as Rias nodded and said, this stray devil has been causing problems and needs to be eliminated. This sounds boring. Should I go to drag? You have nothing better to do, so this should provide some sort of entertainment. This is also a chance to gauge their strength. Issei shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't see why to not do it. But I need to see what you are capable of doing, Issei-kun. I cannot have someone with an unknown sacred gear roam around my territory. In case you face a strong opponent, I need to know what to expect and plan accordingly, Rias explained, to which Issei responded with whatever and walked out. I'll see you there, I suppose, and then he closed the door. After nightfall, Rias was waiting outside an old abandoned hangar with her peerage, expecting Issei any moment now. As to her expectations, Issei appeared a few moments later. However, Rias did not plan to see Issei surrounded by black smoke, and she swore she could see snakes coming from the smoke. When the smoke disappeared, she saw a flash of light and looked down. A magic circle. And what is that design? I have never seen that one before. Is this the place? Issei asked Rias, who in turn nodded. She turned to the doors and said, let's go, while opening the doors. Once the air hit their noses, Issei and Kaneko immediately smelled blood. From inside the hangar, a voice called out. I smell something disgusting. Yet I smell something delicious. Is it sour? Or is it sweet? Rias stepped forward and called out to the voice. Stray devil visor. We are here to eliminate you. Issei shook his head, thinking, does no one believe in deception anymore? What happened to reading the art of war nowadays? The stray started to laugh. From the shadows, the top half of a woman appeared, naked. It looked as if she was floating in the air until her full body came out, showing a grotesque-looking lower part of her body, looking somewhat like that of a monster. I've seen worse, Issei thought, looking at the stray. Rias declared, leaving your master's side and rampaging as you please definitely deserves death. In the name of Duke Gremory, I will gladly eliminate you. You are cunning for a little, I will rip your body and color it red just like your Udo. Kiba sprinted ahead. Issei just followed his movements with his eyes. He's fast, not insanely fast, but fast nonetheless. Rias informed Issei. Udo is my knight. His trait is speed, and along with the swords he uses, Kiba then outstretched his right arm and a sword suddenly materialized in his hand. He makes the perfect knight. Issei studied the sword carefully in Kiba's hand. He was a bit surprised at the summoning of the sword, but he didn't recognize the weapon. A sacred gear then. Perhaps sword birth. Kiba shot forward and sliced off the arms of the stray. The monster screamed in agony from the loss of its upper limbs. Issei then saw the flicker of a shadow near the monster's foot. He looked closer and noticed it was Kaneko. The stray stepped forward, trying to crush Kaneko. Issei watched as Kaneko lifted the foot from the ground with one arm and punched the monster in the stomach with the other. It flew backwards into the wall. Issei thought, strong. Slightly better than normal physical abilities. Rias continued her explanation. Kaneko is my rook. She gains an increase in physical abilities in both offense and defense. A large piece of loose rubble then fell towards Kaneko, who tried to dodge it. She quickly swept to the side, but the rubble still grazed her arm. However, her speed is drastically reduced. Asia? The blonde girl quickly replied, "Hi," and ran timidly to Kaneko. She cupped her hands and held it near Kaneko's grave. The hands glowed green, and Kaneko's injury started to heal. Asia is my bishop. Her magic abilities are enhanced. Issei stared at the green light from Asia's hands. He saw a glint of silver and zoomed into the silver rings on Asia's hands. Twilight healing. This peerage seems to have a lot of sacred gears. Akeno. The girl with a long ponytail stepped towards the monster and raised her hand. Issei heard the rumble of thunder and looked up. A flash of lightning then struck down onto the stray, who screamed from the pain. Issei turned to Akeno and took note of the girl's sadistic smile. Rias explained further. Akeno is my queen. She gains the abilities of the knight, rook and bishop. In addition to her abilities, Akeno is also lightning struck down again, and Akeno started to laugh an eerie laugh. The stray screamed in agony. A sadist. Rias walked up to the stray, who was currently lying down on the ground in pain, and asked, "Any last words?" The stray looked up at her and said, "Kill me." Rias raises her right hand. "Then die." A mass of black and crimson demon power shot out of her hand and enveloped the stray. Issei closely watched Ria's magic attack when he noticed a small movement from the shadows. He turned and saw the detached arms of the stray move towards Rias. Everyone else hadn't noticed and had their guards down from the supposed victory. Issei considered whether he should destroy it or not when an image appeared in his head. The teenage girl lay on the ground, breathing heavily. Her silky black hair was stuck together with blood. Blood that was flowing out the hole in her stomach. A hole that was not closing, like it was supposed to. Her head lay in the lap of Issei, whose face held dripping tears. "Why?" Issei asked. "Why are you leaving me? You promised you would stay with me forever." The girl smiled weakly. "Sorry. Looks like I couldn't keep my promise this time. How ironic. I'm known for my kept promises, yet the only promise I couldn't keep was the most important one to me." The girl laughed. "Stop laughing. Here you are laughing about breaking a promise." Issei tried to scold her, but failed. The girl smiled in response. There was silence for a few seconds. "Hey Issei. Promise me something." Issei looked at her in surprise, but slowly nodded. "I know that my death will turn you into an emotionless jackass. You know it will, so don't try to deny it. Promise me that you'll protect any friends you make." "Okay." The girl's breathing grew heavier. Issei's eyes released even more tears as he nodded at a request. The girl lifted her arm and caressed his face. She wiped the tears off his face and said, "I'm sorry Issei. Looks like fate decided to be a bitch today. Remember Issei. Protect your friends. Protect your friends." That's what she said. But are they friends? Issei saw the arm jump, aiming for Ria's neck. He immediately rushed forward without thinking and grabbed the arm, a few millimeters behind Ria's neck. Everyone saw Issei rush forward and immediately went on their guard. They soon realized that Issei had already stopped the attack on their master and stared at him. Issei looked around and seeing the looks on everyone's face, he sighed. He turned to Rias and asked, "Are we done here?" Rias just nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Issei turned around and crushed the arm that was still in his hand. He waved his hand and a magic circle activated. "I'll see you tomorrow." Raynare opened her eyes in an unfamiliar space. She sat up and looked around the room. She was in a medium-sized room, the walls filled with books and tables full of papers. She tried to figure out what was going on when the events of the previous night suddenly ran through her head. "I'm his servant. How is that possible? I didn't volunteer nor did I die. He didn't use an evil piece either. So he's a devil. But how am I bonded to him? Is it his blood that I drank?" As Raynare kept pondering her status as a servant, Issei suddenly appeared in the room via magic circle. He looked around the room and saw Raynare was awake. "You're awake." Raynare turned to him in surprise. She didn't hear him come in. When she recognized him, her eyes widened in shock. She stuttered, "Who are you?" Issei, expecting the question, simply stated, "Nobody special." Raynare remembered when she asked him a similar question the previous night. She shook her head and asked, "Then how could you make me your servant?" "Simple. I tied your identity to mine." Raynare was confused, but she didn't have time to ask for an explanation. "Normally I would ask why you tried to kill me, but I'm going to assume that you thought I had sacred gear and you wanted to kill to prevent me from being a threat to you." Raynare could only nod, as she was surprised he knew what she planned so easily. "Now I want to know who sent you. Or were you working by yourself?" Raynare contemplated for a few seconds on whether or not she would tell him everything. She was bordering on hiding her secrets when he said, "As my servant, I can easily rip apart your mind to find the information I want. Are you going to tell me or shall I rip open your mind?" For the sake of her sanity, she spilled the information he wanted. She began to explain how Azazel, the leader of the fallen angels, told her to watch over him, since Azazel sensed that Issei had a powerful sacred gear. Azazel wanted to have Issei join the fallen angel side. She then explained how she alone decided to kill Issei, so he could not be a threat to the fallen angels. Issei shook his head, finding several fatal flaws with her plan. Issei thought about Raynare's explanation and decided to ask a question. Are you close to Azazel? Raynare hesitantly nodded. Issei nodded and thought for a few seconds, reworking his original plan. He finally said, I'm going to send you back to the fallen angel headquarters. You will report back to Azazel that I am not a threat and continue to watch over me. Any information you tell him must first come from me directly. You will also raise your status as a fallen angel until you can inform me of Azazel's plans that he only shares with other high-level fallen angels. Understand? Raynare stared at him in disbelief from the orders Issei gave her. He was essentially telling her to lie and betray Azazel-sama and her fellow fallen angels. She wanted to deny the request, but she knew she couldn't. She could only stare at the ground and answer, Hi, Issei-sama. Hajime? Issei stated, looking at the person in front of him, expecting him to make the first move. Kiba shot forward and swung his bakken at Issei. Issei yawned and lifted his left arm in the path of Kiba's sword. He caught the wooden blade between his index and middle finger and swung the sword in his right hand at Kiba's side. The sword hit and Kiba flew into the left wall before falling to the ground, coughing and gasping for air. He groaned in pain, holding his left side with his hand as he tried to get up, but his injury was too painful and his attempt failed. We'll end it here. We will meet again next week at the same time. In the meantime, improve your stamina by running. I recommend 2 miles every morning and steadily increasing it every week. You'll need it to last enough to get an attack on me. Issei dropped the bakken in his hand and left the room. Kiba groaned in pain as he thought, why did I ask him to train me? It was the afternoon after they battled the stray. Kiba saw Issei enter the occult research club room. He steeled himself to do what he needed. He went to Issei and immediately kneeled in front of him. Please teach me. Everyone in the room looked at Kiba in surprise. Issei asked, teach you? Teach you what? Kiba immediately responded. I noticed your speed when you saved Rias from the stray. I wish to be as fast as you so I can protect her. Issei sighed and didn't answer. He seemed to be considering whether or not he should accept. After a few minutes, he replied. Very well. Meet me in the kendo club room later today. Issei went to the couch and sat down. Nobody noticed the small smile Rias had on her face. Issei was heading for the main building, thinking about the lesson. Why did he ask me to train him? I'm not a swordsman, nor am I a teacher. I'm wondering why you accepted the offer at all, partner. You're not the type to help others unless you benefit from it. So, why? I don't know, Drag. I just accepted. It could be the fact I'm just fulfilling her final promise. Do you feel guilty? Issei looks at his hand, where a ring sits on his ring finger. The only thing of hers after her death I found was her body. Now I'm just distracting myself by going to this school with those devils. It's been several millennia since she died, yet I'm no closer to finding her killer now than I was back then. Will I ever have the chance to avenge her? Issei was walking towards the orc room, carrying a slice of cake in his hand. He was still mentally conversing with Drag about his situation with Kiba. He was outside the door of the clubhouse when he heard a shout from inside the room. Hey Drag, should I enter the clubroom today? They seem to be busy. Might as well, partner. You were probably planning to go in, regardless of my answer. I truly value your advice, Drag. You keep me company and live longer than I. You have much more wisdom than me, especially after having several hosts over the centuries. Thanks, partner. You know, you're the first host that has ever talked to me for the sake of conversation. All the others only talked to me out of necessity or did not even talk to me at all. I'm not really your host, you know. I was never born with you as my sacred gear. That's not important. My soul now resides in your body, so I consider you as my host. Be careful. I sense a powerful presence from within. Issei looked at the door. I sense it too. Well then, let's go. Issei opened the door to find Rias, her peerage including Kiba, and 2 other people he didn't recognize. The first Issei saw was a silver-haired maid who stood in the corner of the room farthest from the door, watching everyone else like a hawk. He sensed she was very powerful. She feels icy, both in her personality and her magic. Perhaps she specializes only in ice magic. Issei turned to the other unknown, a young man with short blonde hair and dark blue eyes sitting next to Rias. Judging by Rias' expression, Issei could tell she didn't like him. Extremely weak. Fire and wind magic. No physical capabilities. Yet he seems arrogant. Perhaps he has a special ability. Or a sacred gear. It could be a bluff. Then again, he looks too aristocratic to be bluffing. Pure-blooded devil. If so, then that leaves his special ability. Probably some sort of high-speed regeneration. Thinking if he can regenerate, then he's invincible. Typical aristocratic idiot. Everyone looked at Issei with different expressions when he opened the door. Rias and the rest of the orc looked relieved from his entrance, the maid looked indifferent yet interested in Issei, and the blonde man looked annoyed from the interruption. After a few silent moments, Issei realized that he should say something. He closed the door, went to the nearest window, and sat on the windowsill. "Don't worry about me. Just pretend that I'm not here." He then picked up his fork and began to eat his slice of cake. After a few seconds, the blonde man stated, "Rias, your servant needs to learn some manners. Does he not know who I am?" Rias just sighed before explaining, "Riser, Issei isn't my servant. He's just a friend who comes here after school." The maid's eyes widened slightly in surprise from the information, but did nothing, not attracting anyone's attention. Riser looked at Issei, still expecting some form of respect from him, but they were in vain. Issei continued to eat his cake, seemingly oblivious to the devil's glare. After a few moments, Riser gritted his teeth in anger from the blatant disrespect, but did nothing. Riser decided it was best to ignore Issei and turn back to the topic they were discussing before the interruption. He grabbed Ria's arm and pulled her closer to him, but she resisted. He arrogantly stated, "Rias, you will marry me. Our fathers have agreed to the marriage between both families. They have already decided on a date." Rias yelled in response, "How many do I have to tell you? I will not marry you, Riser. Otu-sama and Ani-sama are rushing it. They also agreed to wait until I finish my education in the human world." She stood and attempted to pull her arm from his grip, but she failed. She lifted her other hand, and a ball of power of destruction appeared in her palm. Riser realized the threat and also lifted his free hand, a ball of bright orange flames materializing in it. The maid decided to interrupt before things got out of hand. "Rias Oji-sama. Riser-sama. If you do not immediately cease your actions, I will be forced to step in." Rias sighed and lowered her hand. "I apologize, Grafia." Riser lowered his hand and released Ria's other hand. "To be told that by the strongest queen, even I am scared." Grafia continued. "Your fathers and my master, Surzich's-sama, have already anticipated this outcome. As a last resort, they have agreed to hold an unofficial rating game between you and your peerages. I will be in charge of the game. Is this agreeable to both sides?" Riser instantly agreed. Rias thought about it for a few seconds and decided it was the best decision. Even if the odds were against her, it was the only way she had to get out of marrying Riser. She nodded her head in agreement. Riser laughed. "So you're accepting it, Rias? I've already participated in several rating games and have won many of them." Rias glared at Riser. "I will defeat you, Riser." Riser laughed. "Rias. Would all of these except the boy be your servants?" Rias nodded and asked, "Why?" "Then this match will be a laugh. Only your queen, the priestess of thunder, is able to fight on par with my servants." Riser snapped his fingers, and a series of magic circles appeared underneath him. A group of 15 girls appeared around Riser. Riser immediately grabbed one of the girls and pulled her into a kiss. Pathetic. Everyone looked at Issei, who suddenly spoke for the first time since he entered. Issei had been ignoring everyone in the room ever since he sat down. He had been discussing with Drake how he joined the club in the first place. The day after, Rias waited at the front gates of the school the morning after he slammed out of the clubroom. When he reached the front gates, she publicly apologized for her rudeness at the clubroom on that day. He waved it off, not caring. A few people, overhearing the apology, spread rumors of the incident. Issei brushed the fangirls off as usual. The very next morning, Akeno stood in the front of the gates, apologizing for the incident 2 days before. Even more rumors spread and more girls annoyed Issei. The same incident occurred with Asia the very next day. Annoyed with the problematic rumors and fangirls, he headed for the old school building. He opened the door, sighed, and said, "I'll join the club. Just stop with the public apologies. However, I will not join your peerage. You cannot change my opinion on that." Rias smiled and said, "Welcome to the Occult Research Club." Issei, remembering how he was played, suddenly started his thoughts out loud at his actions. He continued to talk drag, not noticing he accidentally spoke aloud when he felt several pairs of eyes on him. Issei looked up to see everyone staring at him. He quickly realized what happened. After hearing the insult, Riser broke off the kiss and growled, "Excuse me." Issei seemed oblivious to his exclamation when he looked up and around the room. He put the empty plate on the table next to him, stood up, and brushed off his clothes. He mocked Riser. "I apologize. I wasn't referring to you. But hey, you're still pathetic." Riser's face reddened in anger and said, "Mira." "Hi, Riser-sama." A small girl from Riser's peerage took out a staff and jumped at Issei. In the air, she pointed her staff at Issei, who did nothing. Her staff was a foot away from Issei's chest when he suddenly lifted up his right arm. He stuck out his index finger, and the staff collided with the finger. Crack. Everyone who had just met Issei looked at him, expecting him to scream from the pain of his broken finger. What they did not foresee was Mira's staff crack and then shatter into pieces. Mira gasped and stepped back in shock. Issei leaned forward and flicked his finger against her forehead. She flew back, right into Riser's harem. Rias and her peerage, remembering Issei's power from previous experience, weren't as surprised. Grayfia looked at the obvious power display with indifference. Grayfia couldn't quite obscure the interest she felt from her eyes though. She made a mental note to tell Surziches about the odd boy. Riser on the other hand, reddened even further with rage. He couldn't believe the worthless human beat one of his servants. The girls of his peerage, on the other hand, tried to comfort Mira for failing her master. Riser calmed down a little and continued to brag. So you defeated Mira. She was the weakest of my servants. You wouldn't last a second against my queen. Issei looked into Riser's eyes and calmly asked, would you like to test that? Grayfia interrupted. I'm afraid that if this quarrel does not end immediately, then I must step in. Issei just shrugged and backed down, returning to his seat on the windowsill. Riser grit his teeth but backed down as well. He turned to Rias. I shall give you 10 days to prepare. Not that it would change anything. He teleported himself and his peerage out of the room. The next few seconds passed in silence. Then Grayfia spoke, I must inform Surziches Sama of these latest events. Good day to you all. She teleported out of the room. Issei took note of the fact that her magic circle looked very similar to Rias. Issei stood up. He addressed his club mates. I'll be going now. I'm assuming you'll be gone for the next 10 days to train, so I'll see you then. He walked out the door. Grayfia teleported into a very lavish office. She bowed before the man sitting at the desk in front of her. I returned to Surziches Sama. Surziches looked up from the papers in his hands and set them on the desk. I see. How was the confrontation? Rias Sama and Riser Sama have agreed to the unofficial rating game. They wish to hold it in 10 days. Surziches nodded. I suppose Riser gave Rias time to train her servants. That is correct. Surziches sighed. I see. Anything else? There is. Surziches looked up in surprise. There is a boy who has joined Rias Sama's club, but not a peerage. Grayfia opened a folder in her hand. His name is Issei. The only information I could get about him is the basic medical information and the fact that he lives alone. Surziches was silent for a moment. I see. I don't think we'll be able to find out more about him other than what we have now, if you did the search. Don't worry about him for now. If he is deemed dangerous, then we'll worry about it then. Very well. Grayfia bowed. Have a good day, Surziches Sama. Grayfia walked out of the office and was heading towards her own when she felt a burst of power. She immediately rushed to the origin of the power. The forbidden room in her master's home. She unlocked and opened the door, trying to sense the source of the power, but to no avail. She sighed and locked the door. The door closed and the inside of the room was again enshrouded in darkness. No one noticed that ice was slowly creeping along the floor. 10 days later. Issei was at home. The club was cancelled today. Issei didn't know why, but if he had to guess, it would be that Rias lost the rating game and had to marry Riser. Ah, whatever. Let's see how they get out of this one. Issei suddenly turned around, just in time to see a familiar red magic circle appear on the floor. A red-haired man appeared, with a maid, Grayfia, behind him on his right. Hi to Issei. I need your help. Rias Gremory was worried. She had spent the last 10 days training her peerage for the rating game with Riser. She wanted to win. She needed to win. Otherwise, she would have to marry Riser, something that she did not take comfort in. It all started when her irritating fiancé, Riser Phenex, had the audacity to enter her clubroom without permission. Then, he demanded that she marry him immediately, leading to the argument between them. She was reaching the limit of her patience when Issei suddenly entered the room. She looked at him in relief before noticing the cake in his hands. He stood there for a few seconds before closing the door and moving to the window. He sat down, saying, "Don't worry about me. Just pretend that I'm not here." He then picked up his fork and began to eat his slice of cake. Rias sighed internally, as she knew Riser would not be able to stand being unacknowledged and disrespected. As she expected, he told her to teach her servant some manners. Rias only replied that Issei wasn't her servant, but a friend. After a failed attempt to have Issei show some manners, the topic was eventually led back to their engagement. Rias kept arguing with Riser about their engagement when he grabbed her hand. She was so annoyed that she stood up and raised her free hand, only for a bowl of red and black to appear in her hands. Riser stood as well and a ball of flames appeared in his hand. Before they could attack each other, Grayfia interrupted them. She offered to hold a rating game between them. Riser immediately agreed, while Rias thought about it. She knew it was the only way to get out of the engagement, so she nodded her head in agreement. After seeing her nod, Riser boasted about his previous wins and summoned his servants, a peerage consisting of only girls. She saw him kiss one of the girls and felt disgusted towards him when Issei suddenly said pathetic. She turned her head towards him. He hadn't said a word since he sat down, making her forget he was in the room in the first place. Riser broke off the kiss and said, "Excuse me." Issei put down the plate, stood up, and brushed off his clothes. He looked at Riser and mocked him. "I apologize. I wasn't referring to you. But hey, you're still pathetic." Riser's face reddened in anger and said Mira. Rias was smiling internally while Issei mocked Riser, only for her to fear for Issei when one of Riser's servants attacked Issei. She watched the girl jump towards Issei and aim her staff towards Issei, who just stood there. Her fear increased, only to remember the fight with Stray Devil. She watched as he lifted his finger and collided with the rest of the staff. Crack. Rias watched as the staff cracked and shattered into pieces. She looked at Issei in amazement and relief when she saw him flick the girl away with one finger, flying back into the rest of Riser's peerage. Rias watched Riser redden even further, if that was possible, and attempt to salvage his pride. "So you defeated Mira. She was the weakest of my servants. You wouldn't last a second against my queen." Issei challenged Riser. "Would you like to test that?" Rias sighed before Grafia stepped in, interrupting them. "I'm afraid that if this quarrel does not end immediately, then I will be forced to step in." Issei just shrugged and backed down, returning to his seat on the windowsill. Riser grit his teeth but backed down as well. He turned to Rias. "I shall give you 10 days to prepare." Not that it would change anything. He teleported himself and his peerage out of the room. Grafia and Issei left soon after. It was the night of the 10th day that Riser had given Rias to prepare. The raiding game would be tomorrow. She spent the past few days training her servants so they could hold their own against Riser's peerage. She made them carry their own luggage up the mountain to their training area. She had them spar every day to increase their stamina and strength. She had Akeno strengthen Asia's magic, just in case. Rias was worried. She had trained her peerage to the best of her ability, but she feared that she would not win the raiding game. After all, of the 10 raiding games Riser played, he only lost 2. And those were only to show respect to his opponent. It wasn't the peerage she feared. They were strong, but with her new training, her servants should be able to beat them. It was Riser and his immortality. As a son of the Phenex house, he gained their most recognized traits. Control over fire and wind and immortality. He could heal almost any wound he received within seconds. She determined that there were only 2 ways she could kill him. Use a godlike power and attack him in one shot or break his mind and force him to give up. She didn't have anyone powerful enough in her peerage to do the first option, so she had to do the second. Creak. Rias looked up from her thoughts to see Akeno in the doorway. Akeno smiled and said, "I had a feeling you'd be up right now. Worrying about tomorrow." Rias nodded in response. "You know me too well, Akeno. But as expected as my queen." Akeno sat down next to Rias. "We'll win tomorrow. We'll free you from that bastard." At 11:59 p.m., Rias and her peerage were patiently waiting in the club room for the raiding game to start. Everyone looked nervous since this was their first raiding game. But they looked determined as they wanted to save Rias from her fate. The clock struck 12 o'clock and a magic circle appeared on the floor of the room. A flash of light appeared and they were transported to the club room. After a few seconds, everyone heard an announcement. "Hello, everyone. I am Grafia, a maid from the House of Grimory, and today, I will be the arbiter of the raiding game between the House of Grimory and the House of Phenex." It was Grafia's voice. "In the name of my master, Surzich's Lucifer, I will be keeping my eye on this match. Using both Rias-sama and Riser-sama's opinion, we created this battlefield which is a replica of the school, Kuo Academy, which Rias-sama attends in the human world. The location where both teams were transported will be their base. Rias-sama's base will be the Occult Research Club's club room located in the old school building. Riser-sama's base will be the Student Council's room located in the new school building. For the pawns to use promotion, please head to the enemy's base." Rias knew she would be at a severe disadvantage if Riser's pawns reached the old school building. So she planned accordingly. The raiding game will now commence. The game starts now. We must get rid of Riser's pawns. They will become a big problem if they are promoted to queens. Biba brought a map of the school to Rias and placed it on the table in front of her. Rias studied the map carefully. "Since the forest is near us, I assume it's part of our territory. That means that the new school building is Riser's territory. There will be a great chance that they will ambush us if we enter. The field can be seen from the new school building, so it will be dangerous crossing that. Therefore, the best path is through the gym, but they will expect that." Rias smiled. "So, let's give them what they want." Kaneko walked through the back door of the gym. She walked as silently as possible, trying to sneak up on any of the enemy. However, her plan failed. "We know you're there, servant of Gremory. We saw you coming inside." The sound of a woman echoed throughout the room. Kaneko stepped from the shadows and analyzed the enemies. There were 4 women standing in front of her. The one on the right was wearing a navy blue kippao. Rook, Kaneko thought. On the left was the pawn who attacked Issei, holding a new staff. And between them were twins holding chainsaws. Pawns. Kaneko rushed forwards and struck the pawn holding the staff. The rook grabbed the staff with her left hand and punched the girl in the stomach with her right, sending the girl flying. Kaneko slammed the staff against her knee and threw the pieces behind her, focusing on the remaining 3 opponents. The 2 remaining pawns, I Len L, were surprised at Mira's fast defeat. They pulled out their chainsaws and charged towards the girl, who had just broken Mira's staff, while Shulin strategically waited for the opposing rook to be worn down. Kaneko narrowly dodged each swing of the chainsaws, looking for an opening. Kaneko suddenly jumped into the air and landed in front of a column several feet away from the twins. She grabbed the column and pulled, causing cracks to appear on the top and bottom of the support. With one final pull, she pulled the column from between the ceiling and the floor. She threw the column at the chainsaw-wielding twins. The twins looked at the rook in surprise, not realizing her plan until too late. They raised their chainsaws to try and cut the column, but the column slammed against them, sending them back into the wall. Kaneko ran towards Shulin, only to see a flaming foot in her face. Kaneko flew back several feet and landed on her feet. She wiped the blood that was slowly dripping from her mouth. Seeing the opening, Shulin ran towards Kaneko and kicked with her right foot. Kaneko stepped back, narrowly the attack. Shulin then stepped forward several times, kicking with every step. Kaneko merely backed up with each kick. Shulin, gritting her teeth in anger, started to punch. She sent a flaming left hook with an immediate right hook. Kaneko ducked under each swing. Shulin bent down and sent her left leg up, surprising Kaneko and nearly ripping her clothes in half. Kiba quickly ran through the forest. He was ordered by Rias to set traps there and lead a few of Riser's peerage through there. He was currently navigating through the thick fog, deep in the forest, with 3 of Riser's pawns behind him. As he went deeper into the forest, he activated several minor traps he had set up previously, forcing them to dodge the attacks and delay their assault. He smiled, knowing that soon, Riser would have 3 less pawns. He ran into a clearing in the forest and turned to his opponents, who had just landed a few feet from him. A flash of red appeared and a red energy barrier surrounded the 4. Kaneko looked down at her ripped clothes. She blushed and growled in anger. Shulin ran forward and kicked Kaneko in the chest, who grabbed her leg with both hands. With one hand, Kaneko pulled the rook to her, punching Shulin with her other hand. Shulin was sent back. Shulin wiped her mouth with the back of her mouth. She looked at Kaneko and said, "Not bad." Kaneko, seeing the opening, rushed forward and tackled the rook in the chest with her shoulder. The air in Shulin's lungs was knocked out and she fell to the ground. "Kaneko, how is the situation?" Rias asked Kaneko through the earpieces they received before the raiding game started. 3 pawns and 1 rook have been taken care of. "I'm glad to hear that. Akeno is ready to make her move now. Please continue with the plan." "Understood." Kaneko headed for the door of the gym. Shulin yelled out. "Are you running away? The match hasn't been decided yet. You're abandoning this strategic location." As Kaneko left the building, a lightning bolt struck the gym, obliterating it and its inhabitants. "Take." Kaneko looked up to see Akeno in her shrine maiden outfit, flying in the air. Riser saw him as 3 pawns and 1 rook, retired. Sensing danger, Kaneko jumped from her spot, just in time to see the ground where she stood seconds before exploding. She looked up to see Riser's queen flying. "DCH. I failed." Riser's queen sighed in annoyance. "Kaneko." The rook looked at Akeno, who had called her name. "Go. I'll deal with her." "Hi." Kaneko quickly ran to accomplish her job. "I wanted to fight you someday, Priestess of Thunder," Riser's queen said. "Alright, I'm quite honored," Akeno replied. "Bomb Queen." Kaneko was running away from the fight when she heard an announcement. Riser saw him as 3 pawns, retired. Kaneko kept running until her arm was grabbed and was pulled into a dark room. She looked at the person who grabbed her arm to see Kiba. "Yo, Kaneko. Udo-senpai. Was that you?" It was all thanks to Akeno. With the pawns trapped, it was easy to defeat them. Rias interrupted them. "Udo, Kaneko, can you hear me? Asia and I will launch a surprise attack on their main base, so make sure you distract as many enemies as possible to buy us some time." "But are you sure?" Kiba asked with concern. "I don't have any other choice. Originally, we were to wait for Akeno to destroy each building individually, but that will no longer work now that he's brought out his queen." But it's too risky for a king to leave the base." Kiba tried to Rias. "The enemy must be thinking the same thing. That's what I'm going for. A phoenix's body is immortal, but its mind is not. If I deliver an attack strong enough to break his spirit, I can win. Suddenly a loud voice was in the air. I'm Carloman, Riser Sama's knight. Knight of Gremory, I challenge you. Tiba stood up and stepped out of the room. Since she introduced herself, I can't hide myself both as a knight and as a swordsman. Kaneko followed him. I'm the knight of Rias Gremory, Kibayudo. Aoju, Kaneko. Rook. You must be out of your mind to come at me directly. She pulled out her sword. The blade suddenly caught on fire. However, I love idiots like you too. Now then, let's begin. Tiba stepped forward and summoned his sword with his sacred gear, Sword Birth. The two knights rushed at each other. As Kiba fought with Carloman, Kaneko found herself surrounded by several girls. She looked around, inspecting each member and determining their traits. The one with the sword was obviously a knight. The woman with the mask on the right side of her face was most likely a rook. The two cat girls were probably pawns. The one in the kimono was a bishop, probably the blonde girl in the pink dress as well. For some reason, Kaneko felt aggravated when she looked at the blonde girl. The blonde bishop with large drill-like curls in her hair spoke. All Carloman thinks about is swords, swords and swords. Carloman was making a bitter face when the pawns were being sacrificed, so does she hate the battle strategy planned by her master, who happens to be her king. Then, just when I thought I found a cute boy, he also happens to be a sword freak. Kaneko stared at the bishop, her fists in front of her, ready to fight. The bishop only responded, I'm not going to fight. Isabella, why don't you be his opponent? The rook mentioned stepped forward. Hi, Oju-sama. Kaneko's eyes widened in surprise. Oju-sama. Then she must be a Phenex. The rook introduced herself. I am Isabella, Riser Sama's rook. Kaneko rushed forward. Biz. Boom. Ubaluna fell to the ground, her magic exhausted and her body heavily wounded. She looked up to see an equally exhausted and wounded Akeno. You are indeed a formidable opponent, Priestess of Thunder. The fallen queen smiled. But your magic has been depleted. Worry not. I'll recover after a short rest. Heh. I'm sure if you'll have time to rest. Ubaluna pulled out a small vial. Akeno's eyes widened in surprise. Ubaluna smirked. You fell for it. Rias and Asia stepped out of the old school building. They quietly crawled behind the bushes to avoid any of the enemies. For a few seconds, Rias peeked over the bushes, seeing Kiba and Kaneko keep the remaining members of Riser's peerage busy. Rias continued on moving with Asia until she reached the new school building. She opened the glass doors. A voice permeated through the air. I've been waiting for you. Rias looked up to see Riser. Rias, my love. Kiba and Carloman continued to clash swords. Clash. Kiba's blade suddenly shattered. Kiba cried out, my holy eraser. Carloman smiled. That attack doesn't work on me. Then about this. Freeze. Ice sprung from the hilt in Kiba's hand. The ice shattered, revealing a new blade. Damn you. You have two sacred gears. Carloman charged forward. She gasped when her sword froze and then shattered a moment later. It's no matter. We, the proud members of the Phenex family, control wind, fire, and life. She pulled out a knife from her back, which quickly surrounded itself with fire and wind. You lose. She struck her knife against the sword, shattering it. Kiba smiled. A new blade materialized out of the hilt in Kiba's hand. Carloman gasped in surprise. A black void appeared in the blade, drawing in the wind and flames from the knife. How many sacred gears do you have? Kiba responded. I don't have multiple sacred gears. I'm just making them. I make magic swords with my sword birth. In other words, I can make as many magic swords as I want. Kiba squatted on the ground, putting his free hand flat on the ground. A magic circle appeared on the ground and grew in size. Swords shot out of the ground. Carloman jumped, narrowly avoiding the impaling blades. Carloman landed on the ground, several yards from Kiba. She smiled and motioned him to come to her. Kiba obliged, rushing at her with his sword. As he neared her, he swung his sword. He didn't see another sword appearing in his sword's path. A loud clang rang out, momentarily shocking Kiba. He looked at the sword's wielder, a tall woman with long black hair tied into 5 ponytails. The sword-wielding girl spoke. You took too long, Carloman. At least I completed my mission, Cirrus. Carloman turned to Kiba and smiled. As much as I wanted to have a one-on-one match, I was ordered by Riser Sama to have you surrounded and defeated quickly. Kiba heard a voice behind him. Yudo-senpai. He turned to see Kaneko and himself surrounded by all of Riser's remaining peerage. Yo Kaneko. It seems that we're in a lot of trouble. Kiba told Kaneko as they stood back to back, looking at their surrounding opponents. Rias Sama's queen, retired. Kiba continued. And it seems to have gotten worse. On the roof, a red magic circle appeared on Ria's hand, blocking the flame attack that headed for her. She sent her own attack back at him. Rias didn't try to block. He let the attack hit him and instantly regenerated, showing Rias how futile her attacks were. Rias Sama's queen, retired. Rias sent another attack, this one hitting Rias. Asia immediately healed Rias, who grit her teeth. She realized this battle was going nowhere, and at this rate, she would lose. Phenex was currently holding off the two catgirls and Carloman. The constant random attacks from the twins made her unable to focus on Carloman, who kept attacking her when she found an opening. The attacks were weak, but they wore her down. Every time she tried to attack, they would quickly dodge and continue their attacks. Dibba was not faring any better. He was forced to focus on Isabella, who continuously broke his sword, forcing him to constantly make a new one. During the time it took to make a new sword, Isabella and Cirrus would attack. A few yards away, Phenex watched the side of her brother's servant slowly defeat the opposing knight and rook. She watched them fall to the ground, exhausted and full of injuries. As she watched them disappear in a shower of light, retiring from the game, she remembered the man who argued against her brother. She had a bad feeling about him. Rias Sama's knight and rook, retired. Rias gasped in shock when she heard her servants failed. She realized she had lost. Rias gloated in front of her. Well Rias. Almost all of your servants are defeated. All that is left is you and your bishop over there. You have no chance of defeating me. To prove his point, Rias's queen Eubeluna descended onto the roof. Rias choked back her tears. I resign. Rias Sama's resignation confirmed. Rias Phenex Sama wins this game. Issei was at home. The club was cancelled today. Issei didn't know why, but if he had to guess, it would be that Rias lost the rating game and had to marry Rias. Ah, whatever. Let's see how they get out of this one. Issei suddenly turned around, just in time to see a familiar red magic circle appear on the floor. A red-haired man appeared, with a maid, Graphia, behind him on his right. Hi to Issei. I need your help. Issei stood silently for a few seconds, not expecting this. He mentally shook his head and asked, shall we discuss this in your office? Cirrus nodded and all three teleported in a very lavish office. Cirrus walked to his desk and motioned to the chair in front of it. Please. Have a seat. Issei walked to the chair and sat down. Cirrus sat in his chair, with Graphia standing behind him. There was silence for a few moments. I assume you wish to know why you're here. Issei nodded. Let me start from the beginning. You see, we devils have a near eternal life. To compensate for our lifespan, we have a low birth rate, so the number of children in each generation is small. During the Great War, the devil population dropped. For example, we used to have 72 pillars, but only 34 of them remain today. Recently, we were able to solve this problem. The creation of the evil pieces allowed us to turn other species, except angels, to turn into devils. A high-class devil would receive a set of evil pieces and reincarnate other species into their servants. However, most high-class devils believed the reincarnated devils were inferior to them. They wanted to keep the bloodlines pure, so they arranged marriages between their children to keep the lines pure. So because of this reasoning, Rias was engaged to Rias by her parents. Issei asked. Cirrus nodded. Since I became a Lucifer, I was unable to continue the Gremory line. So that responsibility fell to my sister. My parents engaged her to Rias, even though she was very vocal against it. She was able to delay the marriage until she graduates, but Father and Lord Phenex decided to push the engagement forward. I tried giving my sister a chance with the rating game, but she lost. Cirrus nodded. Issei continued. So what do you want me to do? Cirrus smiled. The engagement party is tonight. I wish for you to break into the party and challenge Rias. I see. Issei was silently contemplating his options. I have one question. Cirrus motioned him to continue. Issei smiled for the first time in a very long time, showing very sharp teeth. What's in it for me? Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Kage no Kenshi for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.